Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. Today we are talking about one of the most important poems of 20th century British literature, The Whitsun Weddings by Philip Larkin. It is a poem that sounds like a simple train journey but turns into something much bigger, about time, love, community and what it means to be alive in post-war England. This video is also available for you to check out in Hindi, so please do that as well. Now let us begin with the poem stanza by stanza explanation. Stanzas 1 and 2 set the scene. The speaker, let's call him the narrator, is on a train leaving Hull late on a sunny Saturday afternoon. The train is mostly empty. Everything feels lazy and unhurried. He describes the English countryside, rolling past farms, cattle, canals, with industrial foam, a hothouse. It is a very specific, unglamorous England. Not pretty countryside postcards, but the real mixed landscape of the industrial Midlands. Stanza 3 is where the weddings enter. The narrator starts noticing all the noise at every station, but at first he dismisses it. He's reading his book, barely paying attention. Then the train pulls away and he gets his first real glimpse. Girls in what he describes as parodies of fashion, veils and heels, all posing awkwardly. There's a slight edge of condescension here. He's observing them from a distance, a little amused. Stanza 4. He leans out more curiously next time. Now he describes the wedding crowds in detail. Fathers with thick belts and rough faces, loud mothers and uncles shouting rude jokes, cheap jewelry, synthetic gloves. The descriptions are sharp and unsentimental. These are working class wedding parties. Larkin doesn't romanticize them, but, and this is important, he does not mock them either. He is simply watching. Stanza 5. Every situation adds another newly married couple. The wedding celebration on the platforms are winding down. Confetti is being thrown, advice is being shouted. The narrator starts noticing the faces of those left behind. Children looking bored, fathers who've never seen successes so huge and wholly farcical, women sharing something like a secret. The girls stare at what Larkin calls a religious wounding, the dawning reality of marriage and the end of girlhood. Stanza 6 and 7. The train accelerates towards London. Fields give way to building plots, shadows lengthen. The narrator now becomes aware of how all these couples, strangers to each other, are sharing this moment. None of them are thinking about the others, but the narrator is. He thinks of London spread out like squares of wheat, the whole city waiting to absorb these new beginnings. Final stanza, and this is the heart of the poem. As the train slows into London, brakes tighten. Something swells in the narrator's consciousness. He describes it as a sense of falling, like an arrow shower sent out of sight, somewhere becoming rain. It's the moment the poem lifts off. The marriages, the energy, the potential of all these new lives. It's been loaded into the train like a bow being drawn, and now it's released into the city. Beautiful, inevitable, and quietly heartbreaking. Now let's talk about what the poem is really about. First is time. The whole poem is one long journey through an afternoon. Larkin fills it with time words, late, at first, next time, this hour. Unlike the romantic poets who wanted to escape time, Larkin leans into it. Time is not the enemy, it's the material that we are made of. Second, community versus isolation. The narrator starts the poem alone, slightly detached, reading his book. By the end, he uses we. He's been drawn into the collective experience of these couples without even realizing it. It's a quiet shift from the I to we that several critics have noted as the poem's emotional spine. Class. Larkin describes these wedding parties with tremendous social precision. The cheap jewelry, the nylon gloves, the mothers who are loud and fat. Some critics, particularly those using the French sociologist Baudouin's argument, argue that Larkin is always marking the class difference between himself and the people he observes, even when he claims to sympathize with them. Lastly, the mundane and the transcendent. This is perhaps Larkin's greatest trick. He takes an utterly ordinary situation, a train journey, working class weddings, and builds it into something that feels almost spiritual at the end. The arrow shower becoming rain is not a religious image, but it carries a religious weight. Something is released, something is given. Now let us talk about the man who wrote this poem. Philip Larkin was born in 1922 in Coventry, England. He spent most of his adult life working as a librarian at the University of Hull, not exactly the glamorous life you'd imagine for one of England's greatest poets. He never married, had no children, and by his own admission was deeply uncomfortable with crowds and social occasions. He published four major collections, but the two that really made his name were The Less Deceived in 1955 and The Whitsun Weddings in 1964, which is where today's poem comes from. Larkin was associated with a literary movement called The Movement, a group of British writers who were deliberately plain spoken, skeptical of grand romantic gestures, and deeply rooted in everyday English life. Here's the contradiction that makes Larkin so fascinating. He claimed to be a poet of ordinary people, but letters published after his death revealed he was often dismissive, even prejudiced toward the very people he wrote about. So there's always this tension in his work between sympathy and detachment. Now, to understand this poem, you need to understand the England it was written in. The Whitsun Weddings was composed in the late 1950s and published in 1964, post-war Britain. The country was rebuilding, there was full employment, a welfare state expanding, suburbs and a working class that for the first time had some disposable income. But culturally, class divisions were still everywhere. In how you spoke, what you wore, where you went on holidays. The poem is set on Whit Saturday, the Saturday after Whit Sunday, which is a Christian holiday falling 7 weeks after Easter. In England at the time, Whitsun was a traditional day for weddings. Larkin himself actually took this exact train journey from Hull to London and observed these wedding parties getting on at every stop. That was the majority of Whitsun weddings. So what makes the Whitsun weddings so enduring? I think it's because Larkin manages to do something almost impossible. He takes a specific afternoon in a specific country in a specific decade and makes it feel universal. We all know what it's like to observe other people's joy from a distance and feel just for a moment that we are part of something larger than ourselves. If you found this video helpful, please like, share and subscribe to our channel. This video is also available for you to check out in Hindi, so please do that as well. Thank you and we will see you again in the next one.